One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
Hi, this is Bob Bender. You're listening to this edition of the business side of music. In the studio today, we have Jason Davis. You've actually been described by the 700 Club as a music mogul, has spent the entirety of your 2-decade career in the music industry. You're an entertainment industry executive who's held a broad range of titles, including award-winning ASCAP songwriter. We're going to talk about your #1 hit song. Award-winning author, independent record label president, executive TV producer, entertainment consultant, former senior VP of A&R for Dolly Parton's management company, CTK Management, and serial entrepreneur. He has worked with dozens of worldwide stars, including Boyz II Men, Sugar Ray, P. Diddy, Alabama, Lone Star, and as we mentioned earlier, Dolly Parton. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Your publicist found us and said, hey, I got this really interesting guy that I'd like to have on your podcast. And I said, sure, send me his bio. Let's take a look at it. I'm like, holy cow, why have I not run into this guy before?
Yeah.
How'd you get started in the business?
It was random. I had always been writing songs, probably from 13, got real serious about writing songs at 16. And at 23, I probably wrote about 30, 40 songs a year just for fun. Yeah. And I'd record maybe 1 to 4 songs a year with friends in their parents' houses or who had little, 4-track recorders or ADATs over the years. And one of my songs when I was 23, which is the song that we were talking about before we started, Captured by Aaron Benward, that song I wrote, it traveled probably 1,500 miles before the internet from person to person, and landed on the desk of a guy named Grant Cunningham in Nashville, who was the head of A&R at the time for Sparrow Records, which was an EMI company, is an EMI company. So he tracked me down. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment, wasn't sure what the rest of my life was going to look like, was pretty...
But you had your whole life ahead in front of you,
Sure. And I was, he just called me and said that this song landed on his desk and he wanted to put it on a record, and I was...
So did you even know who Aaron Benward was?
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't even know that because he was a Christian music artist at the time, became a country artist eventually.
Yeah, with Blue County.
Yep. But at the time, I didn't even know Christian music existed. 90% of me was, my brain exploded and my heart exploded that this could actually be a song I wrote could be on a record.
Yeah.
But this 10% of me was a little confused because I had never really heard of the genre before. So but that's how it started, and the song came out, did well, and then Grant, the A&R at Sparrow, started, taking other songs of mine and putting them on records, and then right at the same exact time, just randomly, this girl that me and a friend of mine had written songs for and produced literally in his parents' house. She ended up randomly, a few years after we worked with her, got a deal with a company called Way Latina, which was Warner Music Spanish label. It was run by a guy named George Zamora at the time. The label, which was in Miami, a Spanish label, said, hey, whoever did these demos, we want them to do the record. And so literally overnight.
As the producer?
As a producer and writers. And so me and my partner. And so literally overnight, without us ever sending anything to anybody or pushing for anything or even thinking it was possible, we were on, I was on 3 records in a matter of 3 or 4 months out of completely nowhere.
Which is unheard of.
Insane.
Yeah.
But I kind of thought, well, man, this business is pretty easy. So I started diving into it, and I realized over the next 6 months, like, wow, this is not as easy as what just happened for me.
Yeah.
But it was great because I felt like God opened the door for me, and he showed me that I was on the right path. And then once I jumped into it, he showed me, like, I'm going to have to build your skills and,
that, and you brought up something that I think is so vitally important in this business, and that is if you just have that faith of a mustard seed, anything's possible.
Yeah.
I've talked about it on episodes that we've had guests on before where, I'd get a phone call at, 9 o'clock in the morning and by 9 o'clock that night, I'm on a flight going out with an artist that I grew up with listening to. And all of a sudden I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm working for this person. And you get so excited. So
it's crazy.
You've got to have not only the ability and the knack for this business, but you got to have some faith, because this business will chew you up and spit you out.
Yes, it will. And I just want to say to that, I could go on for a long time about this, but in the 21 years I've been doing this, there's so many moments that were above what I could dream. And God, I feel like God took a lot of like the childhood artists that I loved and the artists that I loved as a teenager and in my early 20s, and he's just brought so much of it full circle for me.
Yeah.
And I've ended up at some of these artists' houses and becoming friends with them, and some of these 80s rock bands I grew up listening to, I've been over some of their houses, and I'm just sitting there like the 13-year-old in me or the 16-year-old in me, like, how is this even possible? And it's just, it is a hard business in many senses, but it is 21 years later, I'm just as excited about doing this as the first day the door opened. And
I think that's important to remember also, is to keep that excitement. We talked about this before the taping of the show. We have our ups and downs in this business, and we make money and we lose money, and we spend a lot of time doing things, I think, scratching our heads, going, okay, why? First of all, why are we doing this? And second of all, why did this happen, or how did this happen? But you just, you kind of pull yourself up and you dust yourself off. And if you're passionate about this business, which I think it doesn't matter what you do, if you, deliver milk for a living, or, you drive a truck, be passionate about it.
Right.
But it's the same thing in this business, because if you get into the music business to make money, you're getting into it for the wrong reasons.
Right.
And I think a lot of people do get into it for that. Like what happened to you, they initially had this great spark.
Yes.
And they go, okay, this is going to be a cakewalk.
Right.
And then the next thing they're out because they got in it for the wrong reasons.
Right. And I want to say to what you just said that I tell people sometimes this, especially an aspiring artist or a new artist that just got signed, or I tell people sometimes that in the first 4 years I was pursuing this business and really aggressively in it and going after it, and was having some successes, but was also banging into a lot of walls. And there was at least 2 times, maybe 3, that I can remember vividly, where I went to bed at night and said, I'm checkmated out of this. Like I actually, it's over.
You're tapping out.
I'm not because I wanted to, because I saw no way to continue.
Yeah.
And there was actually a couple nights where I can vaguely remember, like, I think shedding some tears and crying at night and just being like, it's over. Like there's no way I can continue this. And then the next day, each day, miraculously, I would wake up and say, it's not over. And I would almost put on boxing gloves and be like, you know what, I'm going to dig in harder, and I'm not giving up. And thank God I didn't give up in those moments, and I do feel that there are a lot of people that will give up right before things are on the verge of happening. And so
I got to tell you from personal experience, you hit bottom, and you don't realize how far that bottom can be until you do. And once again, it's pulling yourself up and dusting yourself off. the whole idea at that point is not to be a survivor, but to thrive. Learn from your lessons, learn from your mistakes, learn from situations and other people, and get back out there and do it again. You know, and I think that's what keeps us going. Once again, I don't know of any other industry outside of the entertainment industry where people will do what we do for basically no money.
Right.
You know, because we just, it's the passion, you know, and it is that drive.
And I also want to say, not to detour too much, but
that's okay. We like to detour on this show.
Sure. You know, 22-ish years ago, before I got in the business, and when I was really revving up that I wanted to do this, my dad said to me that he was talking, and my dad was in corporate America. He was successful, and he was concerned about me going into the music business. And he said
I had the same dad.
Yeah,
I get you. Yeah.
And he said to me, he said, you know, Jason, I was talking to this guy that I know, and he knows some people in the music industry, and he said to me that there's a lot of snakes in the music industry, a lot of bad people. And, you know, at the time I was like, oh, you know, I was young, and I was like, whatever. Now, this many years in and going through the maze, I can actually say, looking back in hindsight, I've met some unbelievable gems in this business that are just strong character people, integrity, have hearts of gold, you know, want to protect their family and make income, which, you know, is right. But I've also met some people that, you know, really did some really wrong things to me. You know, or stole from me, or took things, and some of those, a couple of those situations were literally heartbreaking. You know, where I was utterly devastated and wasn't sure if I could continue at those moments too, because of what somebody had done to me or taken from me. But looking back, those are actually the most valuable moments I've had in my entire journey, because those are the moments where I felt like I learned the most. And I felt like I learned, okay, that was a blind spot I had. Someone took advantage of it. I got hit, but it was repaired. Yeah. And now I know that that's a blind spot. And so now when I meet artists, or I meet a producer or a songwriter or whatever it is, or even like a young business person who's starting a business in the music industry, I feel like I can offer a lot of wisdom and counsel and guidance on how to protect themselves. And it's really cool to be in a position where I'm going back and reaching back to people and actually can make their journeys definitely less painful than mine. Yeah. And so, I just wanted to add that too.
I think that's something too, that from these journeys, and I've been down it, and you want to be able to take, and we've said this already, but we've said this before, you want to learn from your lessons, but then you also want to be able to pass that information on to the next generation. We have some interns here in our production facility that are going to college. They're going to school. They're learning the business end of the industry, but the things that we go through, those kind of baptism by fires, they're not going to learn in the books.
Right.
And so anytime we can help circumvent those situations, we all wind up down a path maybe we didn't need to wind up down. So if we can help them not do it, then we're doing a great job. We're going to take a little break, get a word in for our sponsor. When we come back, I want to talk about your book.
Okay.
Your Love Pursues, and dig into that a little bit.
Hi, this is Michael Mott, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music with your host, Bob Bender.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hi, this is Vinny Rebus, the founder of Indie Connect. Our goal is to ensure that you have the knowledge, the tools, skills, resources, and connections that you need to develop a profitable and long-lasting career in music. One way we do this is through these Business Side of Music podcasts. I'd also like to invite you to check out Indie Connect magazine, our free multimedia online publication packed with practical interviews and advice from music industry experts. Go to www.indieconnectmag. That's www.indieconnectmag.com. Let us walk with you and guide you every step of your musical journey.
You're listening to the business side of music.
We're back. We're in the studio today with Jason Davis, all-around music industry entrepreneur. Had written a #1 hit song for a buddy of mine, Aaron Benward, called Capture. I guess that was back in the Aaron Jeffries day.
It was right after Aaron Jeffries.
Right after
Yeah.
that. So he was doing a solo.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And that was before Blue County.
Just before Blue
Which,
County.
by the way, they have reunited now.
I know.
They're touring,
I know.
so-
I'm excited to hear
Yeah,
that.
so Aaron does his Nashville Unplugged show out at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and then he's out touring the world with Blue County. So good for him.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. You wrote this book a couple of years ago?
Yes, Your Love Pursues.
Yeah. And so tell us about the book.
Well, it's just I felt led to do it. Crazy story. I had about 5 years before I started the book, I had somebody in my office one day that I had not met before. And when he's leaving my office, he turns to me and says, "Hey," and I look at him and he goes, "Make sure you write your book." And I said, "What?" I said, "What book?" He goes, "You need to write a book." And I was like, "Okay." And he walked away, and then
And you didn't know this gentleman?
I never met him before this meeting. Wow. And then a few weeks later, somebody else is in my office, and I did not know them before the meeting. They look at me and they're like, you need to write a book. And those were the first 2 times I ever heard that in my life. And I would say roughly once a month for the next year, somebody would say to me that I didn't know that well that I should write a book. And then for the next, I would say 4 years after that, every 3-ish or 4 months or something like that, somebody would say, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I mean, it was just a broken record. And I even got to a point where I had an answer like scripted for somebody because I had no intention of ever writing a book and no desire to write a book. And then just 5 years later, I'm sitting there with this singer that I'm kind of checking out, a developing singer, and I'm with his parents, and he was, I think, 19 at the time. And his mom starts telling me that she was a singer, and I'm asking what she did, and she basically tells me that her sister was used to be a singer named Tammy Trent. And I was like,
Oh my gosh,
I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, your sister's Tammy Trent?
The Christian recording artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, I actually wrote a song on Tammy Trent's record back in the day, and that song was called Your Love Pursues. She says to me, she's like, Tammy put out a book at one point, and you really seem like you should put out a book. And I'm like, you know what? Let me talk to Tammy about that. And it just started this process of God just provided the people, and it was very clear that the people I was working with really knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, man, this has been a broken record. I should do this. And I literally thought when I was working on it, it took 1.5 years to work on it. It's just about my childhood, my life story, how music started for me, what was the spark, how I grew in music, even in the early days, like being in bands and booking our own shows, and throughout my career, the ups and downs, the mistakes I've made, the victories. I thought when I was working on it for the 1.5 years that literally not one person would read it, because I'm not this huge celebrity. And when I put it out, I literally thought, maybe this was just for me, because it was such a therapeutic process. It's been selling literally every single month. It's been out for the last several years. There's not a week that goes by where the book is not sold, and I do no promotion for it. I mean, I'm talking about it here.
Right.
I've done no ads for it. I don't, so it's been amazing.
But it jumps back to what we talked about in the first segment of the
faith of
podcast,
it.
which is the faith of it. And also, you talk about, you wrote in your book about, the mistakes and the triumphs. I mean, if I wrote that book, there'd be more chapters on the bad decisions and the mistakes.
There's a lot of bad decision chapters.
Yeah, for me, people have said the same thing. Bob, you need to write a book. I spent 14 years on the road touring. When you're in high school and you hear a song on the radio and it's a huge hit, and then within 10 years you're working with that artist.
Crazy.
So then you have all those stories, and you got to share those points in history with people, because in this year alone, we've lost a couple really good country recording artists.
Yeah.
What did we know about them? Truly, other than the hits they made, their stories and their history, because there's young, developing artists out there.
Yes.
Who could learn a thing or two from what these people, what you and I, what we've all gone through.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. So a book is not necessarily a bad thing from what you're talking about with Your Love Pursues.
Yep.
It's definitely got some traction and continues to go.
Part of what excites me about it is that if you read the book, you'll really see the trajectory from the moment I was a little kid to now.
Yeah.
I have a real big passion for, I feel like there's this, well, I don't feel like, I know there is, there's this Grand Canyon divide between what the inner circle of the music industry, the record labels, the publishers, the managers, the lawyers, well, I don't know about the lawyers, but the managers and the publishers and
The lawyers don't know about the lawyers sometimes. Yeah.
And the record labels, like, there's this huge divide of what the inner circle of the music industry actually knows, how the business works, how you get into it, how you stay in it, and the person on the street. And it's always kind of gently, slightly bothered me. Not bothered, that's probably the wrong word, but just bummed me out that more people don't really understand how it works, and how much better prepared would I have been when I was 13 or 16 or 18 writing these songs in my bedroom if I knew then what I know now.
All I got to say to that is amen, because I agree.
And I just feel like, I meet these artists today that, I'm working with managing an artist right now, Austin French, that was on this TV show called Rising Star on ABC. He almost won the show. Mm-hmm. He spent a couple of months with these judges like Josh Groban and Brad Paisley and just all these big executives. And, when I met him, I was just really surprised how little he really knew about the business. And you would think you're spending 2 months with ABC producers and, these big celebrity judges that, you would kind of come out of it knowing I've got a roadmap for what to do here. And he didn't know what to do. And so that's always been a big piece of my heart, is trying to give that piece of it back to, the younger artists I'm meeting.
We're going to take a break, but when we come back, I want to touch on that a little more because over the past few months, Vinny, the co-producer of the show, and I have been having conversations with artists who have been on America's Got Talent and The Voice and American Idol. So we can talk a little bit about that.
Hi, this is Dirk K, and you're listening to the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music. Next up, the Indie Artist Spotlight, brought to you by Reverb Nation.
Hi, this is Anna Tamburella, and I'm a member of Reverb Nation.
Laugh until we cry, and cry until we laugh, and doing stupid things that we all wish we could take back, like climbing water towers so we could see the stars, but jumping off the ladder 'cause we're scared up this far, and driving around in circles on the same 4 streets. Music up so loud so we can't hear ourselves sing. Oh, 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 oh.
I'm based out of Birmingham, Alabama, but I'm currently a freshman studying music at Auburn University.
Get where we're going, we forgot to put on the brakes.
My music is considered singer-songwriter.
It's like I blinked twice, turn around and all of a sudden it's me. We were just underneath those Friday night lights, saying how we wish these nights could last. So how did we get here so fast?
I've performed at CMA Fest, opened for Bobby Tomberlin, Confederate Railroad, played Workplay in Birmingham, and several venues around Nashville.
You can't be late for curfew, but you're up late on the phone, and you don't want to hang up 'cause you got too much to say, and you're hoping that you'll always feel this way. Oh, 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 oh.
Some of the artists I love listening to and have influenced me are Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit and Fleetwood Mac.
Forgot to put on the brakes. It's like I blinked twice, turn around and all of a sudden it's May.
This is a cut from the EP I'm currently working on titled So Fast.
We were just underneath those Friday night lights, saying how we wish these nights could last. So how did we get here so fast?
You can find me on Facebook and YouTube under Anna Tamburello Music.
How did we get here so fast? So fast. Oh, how did we get here so fast?
This is Anna Tamburello, and I'm a member of Reverb Nation.
You're listening to the business side of music.
This is Bob Bender. We're in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee with Jason Davis. Jason, we're learning a lot about you, and I think we're discovering, that what we go through is not necessarily unique. I think we all kind of go through the same things, maybe just in different levels. We were talking about, before the break, Vinny Rebus, a co-producer on the show and president of Vinny Connect, we talked to these artists that have been on these music-based reality shows, American Idol, America's Got Talent, The Voice, etc. And you were talking about your client on the one
Rising Star.
Rising Star, yeah. And what we find out is these artists, they may make it to the semifinals, or they may make it to the finals, or they might win.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, they wake up and they realize it wasn't what they thought.
No.
And
not at all.
In fact, I remember talking to one artist who shall remain nameless, but he did everything in his power to make sure he could get out of his contract with the one show.
Sure. Towards
the end, because he realized that if he kept going, they owned him, and there was nothing he could do.
Yeah, I tell artists, and I really believe this. I tell artists from experience, I believe this, but I tell artists that if you're going to go on one of those shows, go as far as you can, but do not win.
Yeah.
Whatever you do. I don't care if you have to sing the worst song on the finale, force yourself to lose the show and the finale, because if you win the finale, you're kind of dead. Because a record label is going to just put you into their machine. And I tell artists too, when you get a record deal, you're almost, if you're not already on their release calendar the moment they sign you, they're already thinking about when they're going to release you. And that's a serious problem. When you look at an Adele who takes 3 to 4 years to make a record and squeaks out one song like Hello in 3 to 4 years, you're not, the odds of success if you have a record come out 6 months later or 3 months later or 9 months later is extremely small. Artists I've worked with that did well on those shows but didn't win, it's like now all of a sudden you've got the exposure, but you've got a couple of years or a year and a half to make a great record if you're smart and you do it the right way.
You control the timing a little more,
yes.
I think. Yeah. And so this brings a question, is a record deal that important anymore?
I personally, and this is just personal, I personally feel like it is under the right circumstances. I feel like if the artist has a great team and the artist is really smart and there's been a lot of preparation before the record deal and you've got either all the songs or you've got at least 1 or 2 singles that are strong before the record deal, I think that radio is still such a massive driver in touring and ticket sales, and I see it with artists I work with. Before the deal, it's real hard to get traction, and even if you get some Spotify numbers, it doesn't really produce ticket sales.
Right, and it definitely doesn't generate revenue off of streaming.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the second the song hits the radio, with the record label's help, instantly we're getting show offers in and as that song climbs the radio charts, the show offers increase.
Yeah.
And then when the song starts dropping down the radio charts, I notice the show offers decrease.
Yeah.
And the second
It's very cyclical.
yeah, and then the second the next single comes out, the artist gets hot again, and show offers come and tour offers come, and so I just feel radio is still such an important driver.
And if you listen to the show often enough, you'll find out I'm not a big proponent of radio as it has been.
Sure.
Simply because of my years at the record label, we would go out and do radio tours with artists that we're trying to establish, and so. We'd do a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 week. Blue County was one of them.
Yes.
I did 9 weeks with those guys.
So cool.
Playing radio stations. And, it's what we called a grip and grin fest. You go in and you shake hands and you deliver a pizza or donuts in the morning or whatever.
Right.
And play the song on the air and it's thank you very much. And you go on to the next station.
Right.
You may or may not get played.
Sure.
The problem is that all costs money.
Yeah.
And who's paying for it?
A lot of money.
Okay, and this is the one thing I always like to clarify. The artist says, well, the record label pays for it. And it's, yes, but in your contract, there's a thing, it's called recoupable expenses.
Yes, yeah.
And, a radio tour is one of those.
Yes, very expensive.
Yeah, and so the record deal, you need to make sure you can make money on it because, when you go out and you do radio tours, it doesn't make sense. I think things like YouTube, I think streaming platforms like Spotify or those outlets are starting to put a damper in conventional terrestrial radio.
Agree, for sure.
Because I think, we're seeing the numbers.
Especially for the younger generation.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's becoming a platform that it's the same business model that the record companies used for 50, 60 years, and then streaming came along. Well, first of all, downloads came along, and streaming came along, and the record labels didn't adjust for a number of years, and then they finally did, is now starting to reflect it. I think radio's going through the same thing. I think radio chose to ignore things like Spotify because it didn't make sense to them, and they didn't understand it. So I'm not against radio. I just don't think you're going to go out and do a radio tour and get instant, top 10 success. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the first single coming out, if you're on a record label, the radio tour, I mean, there's a lot of factors, obviously, and I think people at the radio stations have to feel like they love the person that they just met. I think that's number one. I think one of the biggest things I look for in artists, it's actually not their voice first. It's actually how would this person do with radio stations? Like can this person walk in a room and win over a room? And to me, that's one of the most important factors for an artist, to be able to that special something. Yeah, I mean, I think it takes a unique person and a special person to be able to walk in rooms and kind of win them over.
I think you just made the $1 million statement, which is it is that personality. It's we used to call it the it factor with Johnny Cash and Garth Brooks. They could walk into a room and take control of the whole situation. You get a lot of these artists in there, and of course, there's so many artists out there touring radio stations these days that a lot of these program directors, they don't even remember your name after you left. You think you're the only one coming in there.
Yeah, they always have.
There's somebody coming in 2-3 times a day, 5 days a week. So you're right. You have got to create a dynamic that controls that situation, that when you leave, maybe your record winds up on the top of that pile that's on the program director or music director's desk, because that's a deep pile that's on their desk.
Every month. I mean, most stations are getting probably 20, 30 songs a month check out or more.
At least.
And they're adding 2 or 4 a month
if that,
to their playlist.
Yeah. And their playlists aren't deep, you know, with the exception of, I think, Americana radio, maybe Roots radio, those formats. Most playlists are maybe 30 songs deep. Americana goes much deeper, 3-4 times that.
I do actually have one big picture detour that kind of sparked on something you said with streaming and all that. But I think one area right now that the record labels are probably looking at and maybe not looking closely enough at, or I think the industry, better said, the industry at large, I think is not looking closely enough to this, is, I feel pretty confident that eventually Apple's going to shut down iTunes and just move everybody over to streaming. And I think when that happens, you're going to see quite a few artists get dropped from labels. And I think you're going to see the conventional album really get shortened.
Yeah.
Because, right now, when people are on streaming services, they really don't think people are buying off of iTunes. But the reality is people are buying tens and hundreds of thousands of copies of things still off of iTunes.
Right.
And when you take off of a new artist, when a new song comes out and that thing sells 30 to 50,000 or 80,000 or 100,000, whatever, downloads of the single, I mean, that is a very important help for the record label to start recouping. And when you take that away and you only have the streaming, I think it's less avenue for the record label to recoup.
Right.
So just an interesting thing that I've been thinking about lately.
Well, I think that's important because record companies don't have the deep pockets that they used to.
Mm-hmm.
I've shared this story many times where when I went to work for the record label, first record label I ever worked at, we had no budget.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, here's your American Express card, go out, do what you have to do and make it happen.
Yes.
And then iTunes came along and all of a sudden we had budgets.
Mm-hmm.
This is how much you get to spend.
Right.
And at the end of the year, don't come back asking for more money if you run out.
Right.
We'll readdress this the next fiscal year. And then we found out we had no budgets. And it wasn't because, money's great and flowing in. There wasn't the money flowing in because now we're dealing with streaming.
Yeah.
And you didn't have budgets and you had to get very creative. And I think you're right. I think if you take even the download sale away, it's going to tighten those drawstrings, those financial drawstrings that the record label has. What you said is a little bit scary.
Yeah.
But it's probably got more truth to it than anything else out there. Yeah, I agree.
And I've heard rumors that they could kill iTunes within even like the next year. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. And I'm sure it'll readjust itself and, it'll get figured out like it always does.
And it does. The record companies didn't die because of downloads.
And they won't.
They've got a lot of resources.
Unless you take the back catalog away.
Yeah. But that's what's kept them alive for so many years.
Right.
But I think the new young aspiring artists, they just have to find ways to be creative.
Yeah.
They have to find ways to get discovered so maybe they can be that next big thing.
Yeah, and really, really, really focus on the songs.
But if they're not, keep going.
Yeah.
And you're right. It really does. We have the bumper sticker here in Nashville. It all begins with the song.
All begins with the song.
And it really does. And I think songwriting is such a key component. When you talk about people like Aaron Benward, of course, and yourself, and Travis Meadows, and Andrew Pearson. I mean, the list is a gazillion miles long. These people who write just amazing, amazing, heartfelt songs.
Yeah.
And so many people don't know who they are.
Right.
But they know the song.
Totally.
So it kind of gets back to that passion thing that we talked about in the very beginning of the show. Do it because you're passionate about it. And that's, correct me if I'm wrong, that's going to help you write the better song if you're passionate about it.
Yeah, to me, songwriting is, I've heard sayings in the music industry over the years, it's 80% perspiration, 20% inspiration. But I think it's a combination of really exercising the craft for years. I tell aspiring artists that they should be writing a little bit every day. They should try to finish, if they can, one song a week.
And writing with other songwriters?
And eventually writing with other songwriters.
Yeah. But get good enough on your own first.
Yeah, I
so
think
you can hold your own.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I do have artists that have made it and have record deals and have had hit songs that wrote 5 songs in their life or 1 song in their life when I met them. And they just don't really do that. But I think if that passion is anywhere in you, to me, that's the exercise. Try to do a little bit every day. Try to finish one a week. Maybe record your best 2 to 3 to 4 songs a year as cheaply as possible with people if you're doing it on your own.
And I think that's something else too. You don't have to go and spend a lot of money in the studio to record a good demo.
No. I mean, unless that producer is like a heavyweight songwriter and like a A-level, top of the mountain songwriter, and they're really interested in you, or there's a good team there. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing it on your own, I try to recommend to artists that they try to spend $1,000 or less per song, or buy reasonable recording gear. Learn how to work things like GarageBand, and there's a lot of artists that I've developed that have had success that they just learned how to record on their own. And had a small little setup in their room or on their college campus, and and got pretty good at it, where maybe it just needs some mixing tweaks or...
Yeah, and you know what? It's not going to be, that final mastered quality that you spend $100,000 on, but it's a good way to set the first stone in the building process.
Totally.
I want to ask, how do people find your book, Your Love Pursues?
It's you would just search Jason Davis, Your Love Pursues, and it's on everywhere where books are sold.
Amazon,
gotcha. Barnes & Nobles, iBooks, so gotcha. Everywhere, yeah.
And then you have some websites. You have 117.com, so it's ONE, and then the number 7.com.
Yep.
You also have radarlabelgroup.com.
Yep.
They can find you on.
Yep.
And then FCMGT, which is
First Company Management.
firstcompanymanagement.com. Great.
Yeah.
Jason, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you're interested in learning more about our show, drop us a line at musicpodcast@mail.com. That's musicpodcast@mail.com. If you have any suggestions of persons or topics that involve some facet of the music industry that you'd like to hear about on our podcast, please feel free to let us know. You can follow us on Facebook on the Business Side of Music podcast page. You can also find us on Twitter at Music Business Podcast. Also, if you're listening to this podcast on iTunes, post a review on what you think of our show. This is Bob Bender, and you've been listening to this edition of The Business Side of Music.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. Co-producer for the show is Vinny Rivas. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.